the people understand it. We'll be leaving very soon. And if France or some other country wants to get oil or gas, they'll go up through the Strait and Hormuz Strait. They'll go right up there and they'll be able to fend for themselves. I think it'll be very safe, actually.
Okay, well, let's bring you our daily update out of Iran, because we are seeing the signs that Operation Epic Fury could genuinely be winding down or de-escalating here very soon. And we've been pretty skeptical to call that thus far, because we've seen this story play out before, where, for example, it seemed like things were going well, and then Iran starts sending suicide boats in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz or some stupid nonsense. That was a couple of weeks ago. We certainly have seen negotiations break down between the Trump administration and Iran. So I'm not trying to oversell anything or get ahead of anything here, but I would like to point out that today President Trump announced that the Iranian president has effectively requested a ceasefire in the negotiations with the United States, which, if true, should be a sign of something, right? That they want to talk. Perhaps we're not dealing with the hardliners anymore that we were before. And after all, we did speculate that this weekend's attack on a heavy IRGC stronghold may have eliminated a bunch of hardliners within the regime, or that were basically holding up the political side of the government. And maybe this now gives certain other more pragmatic factions more room, more leverage to actually talk, because it has appeared to be the case before that Iran will tell the United States one thing, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, get really mad and basically threaten them, and then they say, sorry, no negotiations, I have to backtrack on that. So could be a sign here, right? The Revolutionary Guard is kind of losing its grip on power, which is certainly a good thing. We've established before, by the way, how the Iranian president and foreign minister specifically do appear to be more moderate, sensible, pragmatic figures that are willing to talk with the United States. As a matter of fact, it appears that they actually want to have negotiations. It was alleged that the president here was sending letters to the IRGC basically saying, I want negotiations with the United States. What you're doing is not good for our country. It's not going to be good for our economy. The best way out is a quick and immediate end and a ceasefire negotiation with America, and you're not allowing me to do so. Right? That was a couple days ago. Then what happened? America bombed a huge IRGC stronghold, and then suddenly we're getting the reports of this announcement, right? That is very interesting. Now, following the natural cycle as usual, Iran has since come out and claimed that this didn't happen. We never requested a ceasefire. And we've seen them do that a million times before, right? It's called saving face. A bunch of stupid leftists and third worlders fall for it every single time, and then they get humiliated every single time. So I have no reason to believe that's not the case here once again. But that said, the Iran president did post some interesting, even public statements here, essentially almost trying to make an appeasement, I would argue, to the United States, right? Trying to tone down this very militant rhetoric coming out of the IRGC and effectively say, hey, Iran doesn't want to fight you, so, let's talk it out effectively. And they do a bunch of stuff basically claiming it's not their fault, America's the one that attacked us, et cetera, et cetera. But the message, the underlying tone here is very clear. So that's happening, right? Ceasefire allegedly requested. Public statements from the Iranian president sounding much more moderate than the Iran of past. And by the way, that very information currently being backed up by a record day of traffic today in the Strait of Hormuz, stock markets up, oil prices down, Trump set to make a major announcement on Operation Epic Fury, of course, at 9 p.m. tonight, which we'll keep an eye on here, right? All of this very, very interesting, and it's something certainly that we got to talk about. So let's talk about it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work. It also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, take a listen to President Trump's announcement here this morning saying, quote, Iran's new regime president, much less radicalized and far more intelligent than his predecessors, has just asked the United States of America for a ceasefire. He, of course, responds by saying, we will consider that ceasefire when the Hormuz Strait is open, free, and clear. Until then, we are blasting Iran into oblivion, or as they say, back to the Stone Ages, coming from President Donald Trump. So very clear ultimatum from America. We'll do the ceasefire once you back off the Strait of Hormuz. And we'll talk about the Strait of Hormuz later. But hey, does appear They may have backed off the Strait of Hormuz. Maybe, right? Based on the traffic today. Really interesting, right? But anyways, take a listen.
It's like, oh, they're putting up a good fight. They're not putting up a fight. They're not even shooting at us, okay? We have planes are just ruling the sky. We have airplanes. Those two. We have airplanes. Nice, right? Lincoln with a little modern touch. The great Benjamin Franklin with a little modern touch. But think of it. They are roaming the skies over Tehran. They're not even being shot at because their equipment's been totally decimated. They have nothing to shoot. They have no Navy, they have no anything. And just think about this. They have no Navy. They have no military. They have no nothing. They're losing. They admit they're losing. They're begging to make a deal. And if you read the fake New York Times, a corrupt newspaper, where I'm suing them and I think I should do very well, but you would almost think, who's winning? It's so fraudulent.
Now, of course, in usual typical fashion, Iranian state media has since come out and tried to claim that this is not real. It didn't happen. You can see here, Iran says no talks have taken place through mediators for a temporary ceasefire with the United States and Israel. To which I asked the Iranian state media, or the spokespeople, how do you know that, right? How do you know that? First of all, your government's completely disjointed. It's in multiple factions because obviously a lot of leadership's been taken out, and you're not even really privy to these details. What on earth are you talking about? But you even notice the phraseology there, right? Temporary ceasefire. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear the implication there from what Trump is saying. He's not really talking about a 3-week ceasefire. Yeah, he's using the word ceasefire, but what he's talking about, yes, is really a negotiated settlement to this conflict. He wants to find a way to ultimately pull out, get out of the war with a victory, et cetera, et cetera. We know he does not support forever wars, contrary to all the people who have claimed in the past couple weeks, he betrayed us, he's George Bush in 2003. No, that was never going to be Trump's intention, right? The 4 to 6 week timeline right now is still fully on, right? It's fully being implemented there. But anyways, this morning, of course, President Trump said that Iran's president has asked the U.S. for a ceasefire. Of course, though, at the same time, the Iranian foreign minister, while these people are claiming they don't want to stop to the war or whatever, also came out and said, yeah, we don't want a ceasefire, but we do want an end to the war, right? Which is effectively saying the same thing. I don't know if it's a translation issue, but it's almost as if Iran right now is playing semantics with us, and it's kind of ridiculous to listen to, but take a listen.
We have yet to make a decision. We have many considerations regarding this matter. Our conditions for ending the war are clear. We do not accept a ceasefire. We are seeking an end to the war, not only in Iran but across the entire region. We seek guarantees that such aggressions will not be repeated.
So yeah, as we've covered before, Iran certainly loves to save face, right? It's very important to them. As we've explained before, by the way, the concept of saving face is very big in Eastern cultures, okay? And sure, everyone wants to look good. No one wants to look like a loser, but just understand, okay? This is never a regime that's going to publicly come out and admit that they lost. And yes, they're going to lie. Yes, they're going to try to spin the situation to their people to make it look like they won. You could argue all governments do that, but I just want Western media to understand, right? This is especially big. Like, you don't understand how important that is to Eastern cultures. And sure, I'm not Persian, I'm not Middle Easterner, but it's the same concept in Asian culture, right? Just understand that's what you're dealing with, right? Before you go out and cover and run Iranian state propaganda as known fact. Like, you need to understand the context. You need to understand what they're doing here. And that's obviously the case. Okay, that's obviously what's happening. That's the same reason why he quietly says we do want an end to this war, but with these guarantees, you know, because we're going to look strong and we need this and that, as you probably are well familiar with. So anyways, that said, in response to these ceasefire allegations, the president of Iran himself did not come out to publicly admit or deny what actually happened, which I find to be pretty telling. But he did release this written statement right here. And we won't read the entire thing, but just to give you an idea. So he basically writes, "To the people of the United States of America and all those amid a flood of distortions and manufactured narratives continue to seek the truth and aspire to a better life." It goes on here. Iran is one of the oldest civilizations in the world, blah, blah, blah. We fought occupation and, you know, it goes on and on. But notice talking points like this right here. Notice this kind of rhetoric, right? Even in the face of repeated foreign interventions and pressures throughout their proud history, Iranians have consistently drawn a clear distinction between governments and the peoples they govern, basically trying to make an appeal to Western individuals, Western citizens. Now, we know that's certainly not true because of the fact they literally sponsor what? Islamic terrorism, the type of terrorism that targets civilians. We know they've targeted a bunch of civilians with their missiles, of course, but, this is what they're trying to claim. Oh, we don't blame you, American people. We blame the governments. Yeah, totally. But anyways, again, very interesting. Notice what they're doing here. This is a deeply rooted principle in Iranian culture and collective consciousness, not a temporary political stance. For this reason, portraying Iran as a threat is neither consistent with historical reality nor with present-day observable facts. And, there's other statements here that go on to say, right, basically, despite possessing a military and all this, Iran has never initiated a war, yet it has resolutely and bravely repelled those who have attacked it. So it goes on and on. Basically, I think Zero Hedge summarizes it here quite well. He says, Iran president to Americans says, first of all, U.S. ties among most misunderstood. Iran's president claims that Iran has never pursued aggression. He further says that the response has been measured in simply self-defense and nothing more, and then further suggests that the U.S. has entered this war as a proxy for Israel and ought to stop, right? So, there's definitely some chest beating. There's a lot of ego going on. There's a lot of saving face. And you can tell it's sort of meant to make an appeal to the anti-war Americans. I totally get here what Iran is doing. And I'm sure a bunch of people are going to run and say, oh, look, see, Iran are the good guys. They're not the aggressors or whatever. But let's comb through the noise. We don't care about this stupid performative statement. But really, again, notice it's a significantly softer tone than what you've been hearing out of the IRGC. And why would a guy who's been, we'll say, relatively quiet for the past couple of weeks suddenly release this message and feel emboldened to do so, if not for the fact that the U.S. has effectively eliminated a lot of the hardliners around him, and, this whole thing is moving closer to negotiations, closer to some kind of settlement, right? That's how you have to read something like that. Like, notice the rhetoric, okay? They've been bombing, they've been shooting missiles, saying, yeah, no, and then now all of a sudden they're saying, we never pursued aggression. We've just been acting in self-defense. We don't want war with you, right, effectively, but please stop attacking us. So, again, a lot of saving face going on there, a lot of protection of ego, 100%. So before people say, oh, but Vince, he didn't say he surrendered. Yeah, I repeat, these are Easterners. They're not going to say they surrender, but something like that, right, that change of tone, the maybe small reconciliatory tone itself, right, means a lot to these people. And that's what people need to understand, okay? So we're watching something like that and saying, hey, again, not promising anything. This allegedly has 2 to 3 weeks left. I'm sure the U.S. still has more targets to hit, but this could be trending towards, de-escalation rather than broader escalation, which for a lot of different reasons, besides those who want to see us totally topple the regime or something, but for a lot of different reasons, I think overall is a good thing politically and such else, right? And I've argued too, by the way, I don't think the case that the Iran regime was not toppled or changed just because they're still functionally intact technically is really true. I would argue that you cannot take out that much of a country's top leadership and expect it to keep functioning the same. I think you will see a radically changed Iran regime going forward, no matter what they say publicly, right? We've explained that before, but this is what political assassinations actually do. You have a country without a leader that could cause Iran's regime to topple. It could cause new leaders within the country to pursue a different alternative route. But, much as you saw in Venezuela, and maybe to a larger degree, let me just say, when the dust is settled here, give it a couple of months, right? Let Iran do its chest beating. I think at the end of the day, you're actually going to see what we could call regime change. A Trump-style regime change, sure. It's not the George Bush, go invade and install a democracy by force type of thing, but just keep an eye on that, right? Maybe to a degree, you're almost already seeing some of the signs from the president and stuff like that. I don't know, just something to consider there. Of course, right? One of our big rules throughout this conflict has been watch the markets, watch the money. Well, we do notice today that crude oil prices dropped about 1.37 points here in the United States. So they're now back down to below $100 a barrel, currently sitting at 98 in US markets. So, more trends maybe that things are going good. Overall positive day on the Dow Jones and the stock market, up almost half a percentage point there. But here's maybe the biggest story, right? As you can see, following and tracking the traffic out of the Strait of Hormuz. So we noticed yesterday, hey, a little bit of stuff was picking up. What was going on here? Look at it now, right? We're looking at record ship traffic in Dubai, Sharjah, Furajah, and Karfakin ports here as of April 1st. And you notice that, right? Things are beginning to move. So does this mean Iran, at least temporarily, has sort of gone along with the whole stand off the Strait of Hormuz type of thing? Are they letting the situation breathe? I don't know. But watching the tanker traffic, watching somewhat of a positive reaction out of the markets definitely has to give you some sign of optimism there, right? And by the way, you look at this picture, that's why I also go back to the Trump statement and think, oh, well, maybe he's not crazy. Maybe he's not just making things up. Because notice he mentions, we will consider ending the conflict, a ceasefire, when the Hormuz Strait is free, open, and clear. And then what happens all of a sudden? You see the Strait of Hormuz much more free, open, and clear than it has been in the past. Of course, likewise, there seems to be in the prediction markets a good sign in the economy as of today, because the odds of a recession this year, which due to the whole energy crunch had hit as high as 40% over on Kalshi, now dropped significantly, as you can see here today, down to 27%. So again, going with this logic, hey, follow the money, follow the money. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but you're definitely seeing positive signs out of the markets that maybe at the very least Trump will follow through on his promise to get this done in the next 2 to 3 weeks, which, listening to the early intel about Trump's announcement from the White House tonight, sounds like a lot of what he's going to do. And effectively here, it appears as if he's kind of signaling he wants to effectively almost declare victory right now and start to get out. So I don't know, but take a listen.
Lot about President Trump's remarks tonight. The White House tells us this: President Trump is going to give an operational update on the progress of Operation Epic Fury. He will highlight the United States military's success in achieving its stated goals prior to the operation, which were destroy Iran's deadly ballistic missiles and production facilities, annihilate their navy, ensure their terrorist proxies can never destabilize the region again, guarantee that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon, and he is going to reiterate the 2 to 3 week timetable for concluding the operation. President Trump is also strongly hinting in multiple interviews that he is thinking about pulling the U.S. out of NATO. He would need a 2/3 Senate vote or an act of Congress to officially do that. NATO allies, though, so far appear unmoved.
So yeah, as I told people from day one, this was never going to be a forever war. It wasn't going to be Iraq 2.0. Arguably, Trump and U.S. military planners had learned their lessons from Iraq. I know people claim we never learned anything. Oh, we did, though. We did, because we sort of understood, hey, it's not our job to go forcibly install democracy somewhere and spend 10 years nation building it, right? We can just do our best to eliminate the imminent threat, secure our strategic interests, and then get out. And then what happens to the country is really up to that country, So, but that is the case. And so, I think you could have a reasonable debate in the end about, well, if that's all we were here to do, then what effectively was the point, right? Was it really necessary? Did we accomplish a whole lot? Now, I would argue the answer is actually yes, because first and foremost, I would argue long-term we did affect regime change. Again, people are not going to believe me on that. They're going to say, oh, well, what are you talking about? They said they're still fighting. The Islamic Republic is still intact. Again, I repeat, this is not just about what happens tomorrow. Take a look at what the Iranian regime does over the next couple of months, next couple of years. Look at the domestic situation. They'll probably start to see protests here very soon because of the economic problems that they're facing, et cetera, et cetera. Like, this is going to happen, okay? So I would argue that first and foremost. It's a regime attitude adjustment, if you want to call it that, very similar to Venezuela. In the end, I predict that will be the outcome. But okay, so that is obviously accomplished. We, by the way, fully understand that Iran is a very close proxy and ally to not just Russia, but especially China. And there was definitely a flexing of muscles here done. Whether or not Iran in the end ends up flipping over to our side of the axis rather than BRICS or whatever, who knows about that? But still, right? The fact that there is so much triumph right now done over Chinese military technology, for example, how much that was just effectively wiped out. I would argue what we're currently doing and how we've moved in the world in the past couple of months was a huge deterrence from China going on Taiwan, because effectively they realized, oh shoot, like our military is not prepared. You could argue maybe that's too abstract, but I'm just pointing out, right? These are the actual, strategic reasons I see to say, okay, largely it was successful. We did accomplish some things. This is, by the way, not to mention the heavy damage, yes, done to ballistic missiles, to nuclear sites, et cetera, but even from the geopolitical chessboard, okay? Maybe you could argue we would have wanted for the regime to topple immediately in protest or some coup d'etat or something, and maybe it's a little more intact than we would have liked to immediately declare victory. Okay, that's all fair, right? And there's plenty of political costs that I think you could argue. But in terms of geopolitical gains for the United States, whether you agree that it was worth it, it's hard to deny that they are not there, right? And of course, we've spoken about other ones, such as, the rest of the world realizing that the Middle East is no longer a reliable source of energy and now being forced to buy huge, copious, expensive quantities of oil and natural gas from the United States, things like that, right? Just all pieces here to consider in terms of, was the chess move worth it for America? So, and by the way, all of this is not considering what the final settlement, the final terms of the agreement will be, but just something to consider there. So that's it. Let me know your thoughts on that, guys, in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.